Story 1. Last year I found a hole in the public records. Almost 200 people missing. 40 government officials. A 2-story state-owned building is unaccounted for. One entire prison disappeared overnight. There's nothing about it. A black hole of information over the last year. I've tried to investigate the matter. Up until last week, I gained nothing. I tried to talk to the families of the missing prisoners. They shut their doors to my face and told me to go away. They seemed afraid. I wanted to keep the story my own, so I had to do my own groundwork without connections. My one remaining option was to investigate the missing prison on my own. Travel was difficult. The prison was in the middle of a harsh desert, and the road to it was blocked off. By the time I got to the site, the sun had gone down. But even in the dim evening twilight, I could see what they had done. The site was razed to the ground. A few charred walls and pillars still stood in the back, but the roof had caved. Entirely burnt wood and ash littered the floor in the old building. Stepping around the site, I took pictures. The brief flash lit up the ash-flooring graffiti walls. The red eyes of rats peeked out of the rubble. I could see they were hungry. After 1 hour, I found the cellar door hidden behind the back walls. The metal doors were rusted and burnt hulls peered into the darkness below. There were no locks on the outside. 2 words were scrawled onto them. Human King. This is where my story lay buried. This is where it all went wrong. I tried the doors, but they wouldn't open, locked from the inside. I started banging the doors. Hello? No one should have called back. But someone did. Who's there? I heard a crawling sound, like giant rats scurrying across the floor to meet me. The crawling stopped in front of the door. The raspy voice came again, much closer. Go away! Voice from the other side of the door. I just wanted to... I stopped when I saw things crawling behind the holes in the door across the metal surface. Dozens of throbbing red eyes peered out of the holes. They were staring at me. Leave us alone! All we wanted to be alone. Voices from the other side of the door. I stepped away from the door. Don't come back. Voices from the other side of the door. I walked back to my car and drove out of there, and haven't been back since. I stopped all investigations into the matter. I don't want to think about it, but recently I've been forced to. The photos came back. There were things I couldn't see in the dark. There were body parts on the ground hidden under the rubble. Rat kings painted onto the walls. Something happened to the prisoners, something horrible. And now they just want to be alone. Story 2. This is the story of the creepy cat. Don't turn off the lights. It all started one rainy night when Catherine heard a scratching at her window. She peeped out to see a cold grey cat with yellow eyes sitting on her 2nd-story window pane. How did you get all the way up here, she thought, as she opened the window and took the cat in her arms. As she dragged the cat, she noticed a collar that said Ashes. Ashes? Where's your owner? Catherine asked. The cat just looked back at her, almost like he was smiling. Catherine's mom and dad agreed to let her keep the cat until they found its owner. You can stay in my room as long as you're not afraid of bears. Catherine laughed. She pointed to her beloved old teddy bear, Gus. Ashes just stared at Gus. That night, Catherine fell asleep to the sounds of the rain and Ashes purring. But when she woke up the next morning, Gus wasn't there. He isn't on the floor. He is under the covers. Ashes, do you know what happened to Gus? Ashes just looks at her, almost like he was smiling. Everyone quickly warmed up to Ashes. He was quiet and calm. He spent most of his time just sitting in the hallway, staring up at the pictures of Catherine and her family. The only one who didn't like him was the old family dog, Sadie. Sadie was normally friendly with everyone, but every time Ashes came near her, she let out a low growl. One evening, while Catherine was scouring her room for Gus, she heard a great commotion. She rushed downstairs to see Sadie barking at Ashes, who was on top of a cupboard with a long, thin scratch across his face, almost too thin for Sadie's big paws. But Ashes couldn't have given that to himself. Sadie has been a shore doghouse for the rest of the cold, rainy night. Sometime after midnight, Catherine woke up to a screech of scratching coming from outside her door. She looks for Ashes, but he's not in her room. She walked out into the hallway where all the pictures of her and her family had their faces scratched out. "Ashes, did you do this?" she whispered, but there was no response. She made her way downstairs to see Ashes by the fireplace. It looked like he was on fire. Catherine rushed over, but when she got to him, she saw he wasn't on fire, but in his mouth, burning bright, was her beloved teddy bear, Gus. Catherine let out a gasp. As she slowly approached her, as he did, she noticed his shadow was becoming bigger and bigger, too big for such a little cat. Ashes got closer and closer, leaving burning sparks in his way. Catherine was too scared to even scream. Closer and closer. All of a sudden there was a giant bang, and in charged Sadie, barking and snarling. With a wail, Ashes dropped Gus and jumped through the window, running off into the night. Catherine quickly put out the fire. Ashes never returned. The next day, Catherine searched online for Ashes, missing cat, but nothing showed up. Then, on a whim, she looked up all the unexplained fires in her town. There are pictures from many over the years, and somewhere in each picture amidst the rubble, there is always a little cold grey cat that almost looks like it's smiling. Story 3. This is the story of the funhouse. Don't turn off the lights. Evan wasn't afraid of anything at the fair. When his friends got off the giant Ferris wheel, they were weak, scared, and shaking. He just rolled his eyes and called them scared cats. He declared that the fear was just for little kids and stormed off. But just as Evan was about to walk out of the exit, a high-pitched voice caught up to him.
"You can't leave before you go to the fun house."
Evan turned around to see a tall, skinny clown with big green hair and even bigger, greener eyes.
"The fun house is the scariest place not there."
Evan rolled his eyes and turned to go, but the green clown just smiled, probably for the best.
"You just end up running through the scared cat exit."
That stopped Evan in his tracks. Then the green clown led them all the way back to the edge of the fairgrounds, to the old funhouse. The entrance was shaped like a giant clown, with his mouth wide open. In fact, the clown looked a lot like the green clown. "This will be a breeze," Evan said, as he turned to the clown, who no longer was there. With a shrug, Evan enters the funhouse. The first room is just filled with mirrors. "This isn't scary," thought Evan as he rolled his eyes. But then all the reflections of Evan rolled their eyes as well. But theirs kept rolling back until everyone was faced with 100 wide-eyed versions of himself. "How was it doing that?" cried Evan, as he started to get a little concerned. The room echoed. "How is it doing that?"
"This is how,"
cried the nearest mirror, which then turned from a tall, skinny version of Evan into the green clown. It cackled its high-pitched laugh. Evan rushed through the room, But every time he thought he reached the door, he bumped into another mirror. The laughs got louder and louder. Finally, he reached a door marked Scaredy Cat Exit. He was about to grab its handle, but he stopped himself, took a deep breath, and walked into the next room of the funhouse. This one was filled with mannequins, big ones, little ones, sad ones, scowling ones. Evan laughed. This whole thing was just silly. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw one move. Evan snapped around. One of the mannequins was now right behind him, arm outstretched like it was reaching for him. Evan jumped back and ran into 3 more mannequins that weren't there a second ago. With a scream, Evan ran as fast as he could through the room. He could feel the mannequins getting closer and closer, right behind him. He saw the next Scaredy Cat exit, and this time, without a thought, frantically grabbed for it. It wouldn't open. Evan pulled and pulled at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Then, from the blackness of the next room, he heard footsteps and a high-pitched voice of the green clown.
We don't like scaredy cats here,
cried the clown. Evan bolted through the mannequin room. He could feel them grabbing at his shoulders as he ran by. He pulled it through the mirror room, bumping into mirrors as he heard the green clown right behind him chanting,
Scaredy cat, scaredy cat.
And finally bolted out of the funhouse, tears in his eyes, and ran directly into his friends. He tried to warn them about the mannequins and the mirrors and the green clown. They all stared at him and then burst out laughing. Evan screamed, Don't laugh at me! It's dangerous! But when he pointed back at the funhouse, he saw that it had changed. Gone was the clown with the giant gaping mouth. Instead, it was the Scaredy Cat funhouse for children 3 years old and up. No! cried Evan. You don't understand. It was something different. But his friends were already walking away, shaking their heads at Evan, the Scaredy Cat. And from somewhere in the distance, Evan could hear the high-pitched laughter of the green clown.